صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وظل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متضلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأهوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكروك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجلت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء قلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عتوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك. وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من توى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي للبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي. فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الضليل الحكير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أذج وأبكي لأليم العذاب وشدته أمن طول البلاء ومدته. فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك. وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك. أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناتقا لأذجن إليك بين أهلها ذجيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولو نادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين. يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاك طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يرج إليك ذجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك. أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك. أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه. أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه. أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه. أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه. أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتكه منها فتتركه فيها. هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وهكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل أو إحسان تفضل أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أهوالي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أصرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعل لي من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخسهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وعتف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاهه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقام، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inni wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal arda hanifan wa ma ana minal mushrikeen. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. Subhanallah, 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 Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdi. Sami'allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal Ala wa bihamdi. Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal Ala wa bihamdi. Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Allahu Akbar. Hawlillahi wa quwwat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim ghairil maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. रब्बना ला तुज़िग़ क़ुलूबना बअद इज़ हदैतना व हब लना मिन लदुनका रहमतन इन्नका अंतल वह्हाब। रब्बि सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहु अकबर। सुब्हान रब्बियल अज़ीम व बिहम्दि रब्बि सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि मुहम्मद। समी अल्लाहु लिमन हमिदा। अल्लाहु अकबर। सुब्हान रब्बियल आला व बिहम्दि रब्बि सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहु अकबर। अस्तगफिरुल्लाह रब्बी व अतूबु इलैहि। अल्लाहु अकबर। सुब्हानल्लाह 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 सुब्हान रब्बियल आला व बिहम्दिहि। अल्लाहु अकबर। अशहदु अन ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह वहदहु ला शरीका लह अशहदु अन्ना मुहम्मदन अब्दुहु व रसूलुहु। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि बिहौलिल्लाहि व कुव्वतिही। अल्लाहु अकबर। सुब्हानल्लाह 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 सुब्हान रब्बियल अज़ीम व बिहम्दिहि। समी अल्लाहु लिमन हमिदा। अल्लाहु अकबर। सुब्हान रब्बियल आला व बिहम्दि रब्बि सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि। अल्लाहु अकबर। अस्तगफिरुल्लाह रब्बी व अतूबु इलैहि। अल्लाहु अकबर। सुब्हान रब्बियल आला व बिहम्दि रब्बि सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि। अल्लाहु अकबर। अशहदु अन ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह वहदहु ला शरीका लह अशहदु अन्ना मुहम्मदन अब्दुहु व रसूलुहु। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि मुहम्मद। अस्सलामु अलैका अय्युहन नबी व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैना व अला इबादिल्लाहिस सालिहीन। अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद।
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وجزاء مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليه.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ashhadu anna aliyan hujjatullah. Ya ala salat, ya ala salat, ya ala al-falah, ya ala al-falah. Ya ala khairil amal, ya ala khairil amal. Qad qamatis salat, qad qamatis salat. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Inni wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal arda hanifan wa ma ana minal mushrikeen. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainakal kautsar. Fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shaniyaka huwal abtar. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah, 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 Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdi. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal Ala wa bihamdi. Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayhi. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal Ala wa bihamdi. Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Hawlillahi wa quwwati. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in ihdinas siratal mustaqim siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad Allahus samad lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahu Akbar. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. رب صل على محمد الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وعلى. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد. الله أكبر. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Hawlillahi wa quwwati. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayhi. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Allahu Akbar. Hawlillahi wa quwwati. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Allahu Akbar. Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdi Rabbi salli ala Muhammadin wa ala. Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني ليس العلم بموت رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بقدراتي تقطع إلى قلبي، فجولوا في طلبه البلدان، فأنا في معنى طلب كالهيران، لا عدو في سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض، أم في سب، أم في بر، أم في بحر، وعلي دائما من قلب من وقد علمته إن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وعلي، واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا وما قدره قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزق، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلا رحمتك. فصل على محمد وعلي وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم. صلوات.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك وعلى ابن عمك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك وعلى بضعتك الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك وعلى زوجتك الوفية الغراء خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك وعلى ولديك الإمامين الحسن والحسين، السلام عليك وعلى أئمة المسلمين من ذرية ولدك الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة ابن الحسن المهدي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك، وجعلنا الله من أنصارك وأعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا أهل البيت ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Salawat. Okay, it works. When should I start? Okay. Salawat. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yeah. Sorry. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق قول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى فهم لا يؤمنون إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. صلوات.
Tonight we're privileged to be joined by Shaykh Hassan Roushandel. Can we welcome him with a loud salawat? Tonight he'll be continuing his series on divinely inspired self-esteem. Shaykh Hassan Roushandel was born in the UK. He graduated from Qom Hawza in 2017 and graduated from a master's in legal and political theory from UCL. He lectures at the Islamic College Hawza of England and is currently working as a certified family mediator. Salawat.
This one? Sparkling and still. Oh, really? That's new. I'll go with the one that looks like still. Please recite a salawat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنام حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين الهداة المهديين ولا سيما بقية الله في العالمين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight is our third session on the topic of divinely inspired self-esteem, and I'm hoping that we have the tawfiq to finish the topics and cover all the material that's necessary to be covered, inshallah. As you've already seen, we covered quite a lot of material We touched on very important and sensitive topics and tried to open them up as much as we can in this very short period of time that we have. So it is very normal if there are some points that I have mentioned that may require more explanation and may have raised certain questions in your minds, and if that's the case, don't feel shy to reach out after the lectures, and I am more than happy to clarify or provide more explanation if you see necessary for those questions that you have. So I am completely aware that it is very possible for that to have happened, and I'm more than happy to support you after the lecture, any of these lectures that we have, inshallah. So previously we were talking about the topic of self-esteem and the sense of being worthy, sense of confidence, and we said that as Muslims it's quite obvious that religion plays a very big part in our lives. So if that's the case, then the religious concepts that we are brought up with can have an influence on our sense of self-esteem and can potentially be detrimental to our self-esteem if understood incorrectly, and serve our confidence and self-esteem if we understand them correctly. So the first 2 nights we tried to open up some of the topics and see how is it that they can possibly or potentially do a disservice towards us feeling worthy and loved by God, and basically make us feel miserable, unloved, make us feel like God is in a way punishing us all the time in our life. He wants us to go through suffering, etc. We try to explain some of those concepts and then provide an explanation that can help us connect to God through those concepts and topics that have been taught to us by religion, so that it not only does not do a disservice to our self-esteem and confidence, but actually help us develop a sense of being worthy and being valuable and loved by God. So we started with the concept of ahkam, and we explained how ahkam can potentially be detrimental, how we view the wajibs and harams and what God expects from us. And we said that it's important for us to shift our mindset. The same thing we said when it came to autonomy and freedom. We said that it's important for us to have a sense of freedom, making a decision when it comes to our religion, and then making a decision when it comes to our actions. And then we said that we start with feeling we are free to do so many things, and then we are hoping that we end up with the sense of free from. And free from is basically what perhaps religion wants us to be, is to be free from making decisions based on our desires, making decisions and being completely, you can say, motivated or driven by carnal desires, by worldly matters, by so many of these things. So if when it comes to wealth, we said that having money and wealth is not necessarily bad, but what is bad is being controlled by your wealth and taking your sense of confidence, your sense of being worthy from something which is material. But the opposite of it is good, is to be free from that, is basically you be riding your car, if it's a very nice car, rather than your car being your car to be riding you. When it comes to anything which is material and worldly, not to be completely in control by that thing, but you be in control of that thing. So autonomy, we said, is important. Then we went to the topic of sins and mistakes. We said the shift of mindset can serve us greatly when it comes to how we look at sins and mistakes in life. We covered the topic of tawakkul last night, and we said tawakkul also can potentially make a person lazy, feel miserable in life, and literally cover up for all of their insecurities, for all of their incompetence. Cover it up with God and just say, I'm doing tawakkul. And we said how it's possible for us to prevent that, so that tawakkul not only doesn't become a hindrance of our growth in this world and sense of, being worthy and valuable, etc., but also actually serve it. So not to hinder it, but serve it. Today, inshallah, I'm going to continue with few more topics. I'm hoping to be able to cover them very briefly, and then move to the topic that how can we now, after fixing some of those misconceptions that we may have had, how is it that, do we have certain examples in religion that can tell us that actually we are worthy? So what are the signs of God actually showing us that we are worthy, so that we can get divinely inspired? One of the ways of getting divinely inspired was by fixing those mindsets so that we have the right mindset towards God. But then I want to add a few other things that would actually supplement those teachings, and hopefully by the end of tonight we have like a relatively good understanding of what can help us in this process, inshallah. Please recite a salawat. So the next topic we want to discuss very briefly is the topic of tawassul. Now, how can tawassul be detrimental to your sense of worthiness, to your sense of value when it comes to God? If we understand tawassul incorrectly, this is how we're going to look at it. We're going to say, as some people may believe, and some of us may have used to believe this way, is that, look, it's so difficult to satisfy God, right? God has all these do's and don'ts. God is like, you don't know what he's on about. But then when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt, no, we just, Ahlul Bayt are much better. It's easier to satisfy them. You just beat on your chest, you go for MUHARRAM, and everything is solved. But then when it comes to God, if you want to go directly to him, I remember one of the, scholars, I can say, or people who would wear the turban, I once asked them, I said, why is it that I can't go directly to God? Why is it that you tell me that I need to go through the Ahlul Bayt? And he was like, look, because look at you. You're so filthy and sinful and full of mistakes. And I just was like, oh my God. And he's like, how can you go directly to God? But then go to the Ahlul Bayt, right? Go to them. They will take you in, but God, no. And that really didn't feel right to me. I'm like, what does that even mean? So if you really look at it that way, you can never be divinely inspired by God when it comes to your self-esteem. You're always going to see God as this Lord that's always, there. He's waiting for you to, if you make a mistake, for him to punish you for it. But then the Ahlul Bayt are those who are like, hey, God, relax. No, I'll take him. Don't worry, God, I'll take care of him. I will intercede for him. I will. If that's the mindset, this can be very wrong. But what is the right mindset when it comes to tawassul? The right mindset is that when God says that inna rahmatallahi wasi'ah, God's rahmah, God's mercy is vast. His mercy, when you recite Du'a Kumayl, I think you recited it tonight. What does Du'a Kumayl start with? What's the first line? Allahumma inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. Your rahmah which has expanded everything, in everything. So some of the scholars have used this phrase to say that you should be able to explain punishment of God and hellfire by looking at this phrase and saying when it says wasi'at kulla shay means wasi'at jahannam as well. So his rahmah has wasi'at jahannam as well. So you have to be able to explain jahannam using God's rahmah. So if that is what God's rahmah is, then through the narrations we see that, wow, this is amazing. So God shows part of his rahmah through the Ahlul Bayt. So it is God that says to the Ahlul Bayt, even when it comes to shafa'ah on the Day of Judgment, it is God that says to the Ahlul Bayt, I want to show my mercy to people. Now part of it I will show it myself through certain means, and part of it I want to show it through you guys. So you guys go and do the work, for example, if we understand it that way. If, there's a few ways of understanding how the Ahlul Bayt actually work, but that's not really the point of tonight. It's how we see tawassul. So when we go to the Ahlul Bayt and we say, oh Imam Hussein, please, do this, do that, give me this, give me that. This is a very typical way of, addressing them, usually. When you're doing that, you have to realize that by doing this, you're literally saying, Imam Hussein, I know God. If God wants to give this to me, I want him to give it through your channel. I want you to pray for me for this. And when you look at it this way, not only God is not going to come down in your eyes and then Ahlul Bayt go up, but actually they'll be completely in line. And when you're asking the Ahlul Bayt, you're literally asking the Ahlul Bayt. The Qur'an says, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَابًا رَحِيمًا. So there is a way that if they come to you and they ask for forgiveness from God, وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ, and also the Prophet asks for their forgiveness. So there is a possibility, we see it in the Qur'an as well, that the Prophet to ask for something for the people. So when you go to the Prophet, you ask the Prophet, oh Prophet, ask Allah for something for me. And this doesn't bring God down. It actually shows that God has so many different channels in this world. وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ. You're using everything in this world you're using, when you wake up in the morning, you go to your kitchen, you make yourself breakfast, everything is a wasila, everything is a medium for you, provided by God, even the Ahlul Bayt. So tawassul as well, looking at it this way, can be a means of connection to God, rather than a form of distancing God for yourself. This is the concept of tawakkul and how we can use it. The next topic is a very important one. The topic of dua. Now, every single one of these topics should be perhaps opened up and discussed in a few lectures, and I'm fully aware of that. But we're trying our best to just mention the necessary and then get to the final point, inshallah. The concept of dua. If you understand dua incorrectly, your life will be a miserable life. You're never going to be able to connect to God correctly. I have experienced this in my life. I have seen so many people that when they open up, they say, what is this dua thing, man? Like, we just really don't understand it. God says, ask me, I will give you. And then we ask, and our experience says that we've asked for so many things and we have or haven't got it. I hope you don't say have. If you're honest enough, you would say that there are many cases that we've asked something and we haven't got it. So either, nastajiru billah, God is not saying a correct statement, he's not making a correct statement in the Qur'an, or we have misunderstood the Qur'an and the narrations, or there's something wrong with us. We're really not doing dua. We think we're doing dua. Well, whatever it is, it's such an unpleasant experience. You have the religion saying you, hey, do dua, ask Allah for everything. In our culture, there's a push for it. Whatever you want, ask Allah and He will give you. And then you go through it, a lot of the times you won't get it. And then you would have to question this. So what's the point of doing dua? This has led to so many people say that, well, from a philosophical perspective, there's some philosophers who've said that, yes, God is the creator of the universe, everything we agree, but this God who created the universe, we cannot really prove philosophically that you can ask Him for a favor and that He will respond to that favor and give you what you want. This has been the stance of some of the philosophers, not Muslim philosophers, but in general. Some of the Muslim philosophers have discussed it from a philosophical perspective and said that from a philosophical perspective, we don't have enough evidence to say that this God you can do dua to. Not dua to praising Him, but asking Him for favors and then expecting Him to respond. So things kind of change in this world as if you ask for something, you send an energy and then it kind of translates into what you want and then it comes to you at the door. So some of the philosophers have completely denied this. But then when you come to the religious literature, you say, how can we then explain all these verses in the Qur'an? Few verses very explicitly say this. And then it creates a confusion in us. Human experience proves that in most cases, yes, there are some cases, I think all of us perhaps have had this experience once or twice or maybe more in our life, that we have asked for something and then we've got it. But someone can be very skeptical at this point and say, hey, even if you're talking to the wall and you're asking the wall for like 100 things, probably 2 or 3 of them will randomly just happen to you in your life. It doesn't mean the wall actually gave it to you. So someone can also be skeptical and say that to you. So it's very difficult, this concept. How are we supposed to resolve this? Now, we're going to get to how to resolve this and how to understand dua, inshallah. Very briefly, I'll explain that. But I'm trying to see whether you've understood how it can be detrimental to our sense of confidence. So can I feel confident when I do dua to God? So, like, you would rather, if you have self-esteem, if you feel confident enough, if you value yourself enough, imagine you're going to a person and you're asking, just imagine a person in your life. You go to them, you ask them once, they completely ignore you. You go second time, they ignore you, your experience. Third time, they ignore you. What is a person who has a sense of value, a person who respects themselves? What would this person do for the 4th time? You would not go to that person anymore, right? So this is how so many people this is how the experience of so many people has been. At some point they say, I'm not going to ask him anymore. So what's the point of asking? And it's very valid because it comes from your personal experience. So coming to the concept of dua now, we understand the problem and how it can be very, very harmful to our personal lives. But let's look at the Qur'an. What's the position of the Qur'an on the concept of dua? Number 1, the Qur'an criticizes and condemns the Jews and says, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ. What did the Yahud say? The Yahud said that, look, it's God that we're talking about. He created the universe, but what happened afterwards? He just stepped back. And he's like, let the universe do whatever it's doing. I'm not going to change anything in it. So, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ. His hands are tied up. God's hands are tied up. So they solved the problem by saying what? His hands are tied up. Just leave him alone, right? Just do your own work. But then the Qur'an criticizes them and says, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. It curses them. غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَلُعِنُوا بِمَا قَالُوا. And they were cursed because of what they had said. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. Not only his hands are not tied up, but his hands are مَبْسُوطَتَانِ, they're fully open. يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. And he gives, does infaq, he blesses people, he bestows upon people, كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ, in any way he wants. His hands are fully open and okay. So his hands are not tied. So we can't say that. But is there a guarantee in the Qur'an that if you do dua to God, he's going to respond to every single dua that you do? This is the question number 2, because this is always what has been said to us, right? God has guaranteed that he's going to give you, but just ask him. When you look at the tafsir of Allama Tabatabai of these verses in the Qur'an, he says this is the wrong understanding. The Qur'an never gave an unconditional guarantee that any form of dua you do to God, it's going to be responded. It never exists. But what about those verses? We're going to discuss them. The verse in the Qur'an says, the verse says something along these lines, وَمَا دُعَاءُ الظَّالِمِ وَمَا دُعَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ, correct? So he says there are a certain group of people who if they do dua, their dua is nothing but in void. So they're saying it by tongue, it goes nowhere. And then when it comes to the dua that it has guaranteed, it puts 2 conditions on it. Allama Tabatabai says, which these 2 conditions need to be met in order for you to have a guaranteed istijaba of dua. Other than that, there's no guarantee. It's hit or miss. It depends on so many things in your life. He says, what's the verse in the Qur'an? وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. And when my servants ask of you, I am close. So there's no problem of distance here with God as well. So it's not like he can't hear what you're saying. He's very close. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ in another verse. When we are so close to them, from the closer than the vein in your neck, or there's a nicer translation of it. I do realize that, but I don't know that the sophisticated words for it. So we're very close to you. So there's no problem of being close. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. I respond to the request of a person who calls upon me and asks me, إِذَا دَعَانِ, with one condition, when he does dua and to me. Allama Tabatabai says, initially when you look at this verse, it seems like it doesn't put any condition on it. It says, I respond to whoever does dua. But he says, no, if you look at it more precisely, there's two very important conditions here. Number one, that you need to do dua. And number two, it needs to be only directed at God. He says, although on the surface it seems like these two conditions are very easy, in practice, most of us are not able to fulfill these two conditions. Now, does that mean we have to be depressed and say we don't do dua anymore? No. Let me explain first what these two conditions are, and then I'll say what the solution of it is. Condition number one, dua. It needs to be a dua. He says there's so many times you say something by tongue, but it's not in line with your heart. How would you know this? Well, sometimes you can test yourself. You say, I really want to become rich. Okay. Are you ready to pay the price for it? When it comes to paying the price for it in your life, a lot of the times people say, no, I really don't want it. I thought I want it, but it's not really the case. So for you to be able to get a guaranteed istijaba, you need to do the right dua, and the right dua is the one which is in line with your heart. So a person who's not conscious enough to know exactly what they want, what comes to their tongue is not in line with what really and truly exists in their heart, they don't give the right energy to this universe for them to be able to be a good recipient of the result that they are requesting. And God doesn't give them. If you don't know what you really want and you don't really do the right dua, you expect God to give you what you don't know what you want? You want God to replace no, that's your job to do, he says. You need to know. Condition number two, it needs to be only directed at God. It needs to be in a form of a detachment from everything else. The closer you are to sincerely ask from God, the closer you are to receive your dua, the answer to your dua. This condition of completely detachment from everything else, there's another verse in the Qur'an that depicts a scenario for you where you do reach that. So you, in that scenario, have the two conditions met. There's another verse that talks about dua that says, أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. So he's comparing two groups. So he's saying, is whoever the other one is it that, or the one, or God, أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ, the one who is desperate, or the one who responds to the one who is desperate when they ask him. What is very special about desperation? Allama Tabatabai says, I think this is Shaykh Mutahhari says for this one. Shaykh Mutahhari says, desperation is a place where, for example, you're going through some financial difficulties, and then suddenly in your mind you start thinking like, okay, I can go to my dad. You go to your dad, either he gives or he doesn't give. If he gives, then, this is it, finished, end of story. If he doesn't, he says, no, I don't have money, I can't give you. And then you start thinking, you're like, okay, who else can I go to? So there's so many options that come to your mind. But then it happens very rarely, but in our lives, sometimes for some of us it's happened, that we reach a stage where like, I have nowhere to go. I literally have nowhere to go. I am fully desperate. And in that moment, when you are in a state of desperation, these two conditions are usually met. It's not always for every single person, but for many people, the two conditions are met in the state of desperation, where they are completely desperate, they have no one else to go to. So the heart finds the Lord and it prays to Him sincerely and says, "Oh God, man li ghayruk? Who do I have? Ilahi ila man takiluni." You see in the words of the Ahlul Bayt, beautiful. They try to teach us so much in their du'as that, hey, try to reach a position of detachment with God, because when you become completely detached to God, that is where you get everything from Him. Ilahi ila man takiluni. Oh God, who do you leave me to? Ila qaribin fayaqta'uni. To someone who is close to me, my family, my friends. Ila qaribin fayaqta'uni. To the people who are close, there will come a time that they will basically cut their ties with me. They'll never always remain with me. We've all had this experience, that someone who was very close to us as a friend, but now we hardly speak on the phone. A family member, now changed countries, we don't even speak regularly. So the qarib becomes ba'id. Am ila ba'idin, or you're basically leaving me to someone who's already far from me. فَيَتَجَهَّمُنِي. He's someone who can actually be harmful to me, attack me, cause threat and pose threats for me. So God, who do I really have in this world? Shaykh Mutahari says, sometimes we reach the state of desperation involuntarily. It happens in our life, right? Things go wrong and then we go to everyone who we want and then we can't find anyone who helps us. Then we are forced to be desperate and then we call upon God. Shaykh Mutahari says very beautifully, he says, however, there are some people I know of in this world that before they are pushed into a situation of desperation, they voluntarily put themselves through scenarios in life and through the mindset that they develop a sense of desperation to God, even if in their worldly matters and their day-to-day life they're not really desperate. But they see God through a lens that they would realize that they are completely dependent on God. And this person who reaches this state, he will inevitably fulfill the two conditions of dua. And this is why, brothers and sisters, in our cultures, when you look back, ask your parents, your family, your grandparents. I believe in every culture this existed, that there are stories of people that used to be mustajabud da'wah. Their du'as used to be answered by God. Like in different villages, in different, families. They used to say, there was an Ali, there was a Fatima, there was a, Bibi Fulan, there was a Amma Fulan, Uncle Fulan, who really he had this connection with God that whenever anyone needed something, they would go to him and say, hey, please pray for me. And this person, when they would pray, suddenly God will answer. Or we had it with our scholars. There were some of the scholars that people used to go to them and say, hey, please pray for me. Why? Because that scholar had reached a state of desperation voluntarily, that you don't need to be desperate financially, emotionally, physically, whatever it is. You don't need to necessarily be desperate in order to develop the mindset of desperation, but some of them had developed that through devotion to God, through connection with God. And when that is the case, people used to go to them and say, hey, please do dua for me. Why? Because God only guarantees that if someone reaches a state where they can do the real dua and complete detachment, their duas are answered in this world. Inevitably, it's impossible for this person to do dua then, and the dua not to be answered. So if our duas are not answered, because a lot of the times they're done unconsciously, because we think what's asked from us is only just to say the word and then the rest is with God, but not knowing that everything is on us. Making the right dua is on us. Reaching the state of desperation is on us. And then when you do reach those two states, then the result, it comes inevitably. Before you even ask for it, it comes to your life. And having said this, one question may be raised by some of you or some of us, and that is, so what's the point of doing dua if we haven't reached that state yet? Right? So why should we do it now? Let us wait until we reach the complete detachment and complete inqita' ila Allah, a complete form of, we know exactly what we want. Again, Shahid Mutahari says, the haqiqah, the reality of dua. So why do we do dua? It's not primarily in order to get what we want in this world. Oh Allah, give me this car, or Allah, give me this, give me that. He says this is looking at it in a very simple manner. The reason why we do dua and we are told to constantly do dua is because when you do it with the right mindset, the more you practice dua, the more you're practicing detachment. He says the haqiqah of dua is detachment. So that more you say, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to completely be distracted from everyone else around me, although they are the ones who maybe give my pay slip, who maybe make food for me during the day, who maybe tuck me in during the night and everything. But I'm going to give myself the moment to close my eyes and be completely detached from all of these beings that have been created by God and say, Hasbiya Rabbu min al-marbubin, which is a dua that is taught to us after morning prayer to recite. Hasbiya Rabbu min al-marbubin. God suffices me from all of the others which are created by God and nurtured by God. Hasbiya raziqu min al-marzuqin. The raziq suffices me from all of these marzuqin, even if they are signing my payslip and giving me all I have in my life. Hasbiya al-khaliqu min al-makhluqin, and so on. So he says the reason why we're continuously doing dua is not to get the car and the house. Primarily, it's for us to practice the detachment so that when we do reach there, whatever you ask for, you will get. Because you truly know what is in your heart, you're fully conscious of yourself, and then you also have the complete detachment. So this is a very brief explanation on what dua could actually be and how we can understand it, and then how can potentially and possibly we misunderstand it, and this beautiful concept of dua can become a source of misery in our life if we misunderstand it, and then could be a source of us being resentful, completely end up leaving religion, leaving these concepts, and not even doing dua anymore, because it's like, oh, come on, who really wants the headache of doing dua when we're not really getting what we want? Let me just go and get it myself. But not knowing that going get it yourself and doing dua are not contradictory, as much as it may seem initially without looking into it deeper, that it may be contradictory. So this is dua. Now, we're out of time. Okay, I'm looking at the list. The past few nights I didn't make a list, and then tonight I realized that I just mentioned too many things that I'm just gonna forget what I said, and I'm gonna repeat myself if I don't make a list of myself. So today, before coming, I just had to make a list to know exactly what I said and whether I've reached where I wanted to reach or not. But I think, okay, I was going to say a few other things that can help self-esteem, but I think up until now, we've managed to cover a number of topics that can truly help us change our mindsets. And if we do change our mindsets and look at these religious concepts from the right point of view, from the point of view that have been taught to us by the Ahlul Bayt, this morning I said very clearly, I said the Ahlul Bayt tried to make us aware of the fact that let us go beyond the surface. Let's look into the deeper meaning of these things, because it's very possible for us to get stuck on the surface, and not only it wouldn't do us any good, but can also do us a lot of harm. So these 3 series of lectures, or you would say 4 lectures in this series of lectures, were aimed at trying to change our mindsets in order to develop the right mindsets, which if we do so, these will directly influence our sense of worth. And I'm going to say one line and hopefully end my lecture. And this one line is that a lot of these points that I mentioned tonight were from the Qur'an and the narrations. I mentioned verses of the Qur'an, I mentioned narrations from the Ahlul Bayt, And you have to know that God spent, I won't use the word wasted, it's not the right word. He spent probably would be a good word. The best of his creation. Who's the best of his creation? The ones he loved the most were the prophets, were the imams. So he spent the best of his creation for whom? For us. So is there any other way that God can prove to you that he cares about you, that he put all of these individuals through so much difficulty and put in a way a burden on them to come, and those of them who gave up on the people were actually punished by God and said, no, go back to the people and give them the hidayah. And yes, they are denying you. Yes, they are innal insana la zalumun or jahil and all of those things, attributes that they give to insan. But still, God never gave up to this insan and spent the best of his creation for this insan. So let's say that when he's spent all these things, and they've been the greatest of the creation of God spent for us to be able to have these verses of the Qur'an in front of us today, the narrations in front of us today, and to be able to utilize it. And this shows that how much God values us. And inshallah we can understand this, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase in our understanding and consciousness of his love for us, of how much he values us and how much he truly has instilled the sense of worth within us if we connect to him. And we pray that Allah does give us that sense of self-esteem, the divinely inspired one, inshallah, with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much for your talk. We have a bit of time for some question and answers. So if there's any questions from either the ladies or the men's side, let us know.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I had a quick question regarding detachment. What are the ways the Ahlul Bayt have actually recommended to be detached? Because I think because of God's Rahmaniyya towards all of creation, we're so independent that it's with just second nature we do things, but we may not attribute to God consciously because we're so used to doing it within our lives. So have the Ahlul Bayt given us any teachings or recommendations to actually detach from these things so we can actually reach that state? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is, if I want to be honest, is as I don't know, right? The answer to that. It's not a very easy answer to give. However, I can say one thing, and that is, through the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, most of our scholars have said this, that the Ahlul Bayt did not encourage you to go sit at home or go away from the people to the mountains and have completely detached yourself physically. In one of the phrases that's attributed to the mu'mineen, I think it's from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, but some of the scholars have said that this is a quality that he's saying of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but he's expanded it and he said that, generalized it, and whoever gets to that level, he says, Ruhbanul layl wa luyuthun nahar. These people are the rahib, means basically, how do you translate rahib? Anyone? Any idea? Rahib is sorry? I can't hear you, sorry. Hermit? Well, it's basically, rahib are the ones who devote themselves to the church, let's say, or to a temple and completely, detach themselves, monks, and so that type of a mentality. But he says, Ruhbanul layl, at night. At night, they are the ones who are fully devoted to worship, to God. وَلُيُوثُ nahar. During the day, they are lions, right? So they manage to put dunya and akhirah together. So if you put more towards the ruhbaniyya and staying away from people and, secluding yourself, and he says, no, That's not the way Ahlul Bayt have taught us, because that could lead into so many, you can get wrong in the head, right? There've been many examples of people who've done that. And then, if you do the Luyuthun Nahar, the Shahid Chamran example I gave as well was a very good example. I think you gave it in the first night. That during the day, you do all that's necessary from you. You're like a lion. You're working, right? You're strong. You're with people, but then at night you compensate for that. So this is just one indication. So it's not easy. I don't know exactly how that is, but in the narrations there's du'as, right? Ilahi habli kamal al-inqita'i ilayk. So part of it is just you really and truly focusing on it and say, oh God, grant it to me. And when you focus on it enough, then inshallah God will open doors for us to be able to reach that level.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions on either side?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
So my understanding of dua, when it's not answered, I've always been taught that if it's not answered, it's because it wasn't good for me at that time. So is that wrong? It's because I don't fulfill the two conditions.
Okay, I'm not going to say that's wrong, right? So what I explained to you was the peak, right? So if you reach the peak, then all your du'as will be answered. And then I said, imagine the bottom here is someone who literally just, does du'a and has no connection whatsoever. So here we explained that, it's in dalal. It's literally, in void. But then in between, so there's a spectrum here, right? There's people in between here. We're trying to get there. So we're not as strong as getting whatever we ask for. It's possible to reach there, apparently, based on what Allama Tabatabai says, not based on what I say. But we're not there yet. But we're not like, zero. So over here, we have narrations that says God compensates. So sometimes your energy is not the strongest of an energy to be able to get what you want because your capacities, you're not ready for it. But then if you have the right dua, means if it comes from your heart, nothing can come from your heart when you don't have the right capacity for it. So because when you're truly doing it from you're conscious of yourself and what you need and what capacity you have. So if you don't fulfill those conditions for whatever reason, God is not going to say this is completely void. So they will have narrations that says, yes, God will give you in some other way, right? So there's no dua that is not answered. But the answer depends. Part of it depends on yourself, and part of it depends on whether it's right for you or not. So it's very complicated to know what is it exactly at this point that's happening to me. But the best thing is just to think of it as a husn al-dhan, to say whatever it is, it's not going to go void. So because I'm asking God, if it comes to me, then alhamdulillah. If it doesn't come to me, still I will say alhamdulillah, and I would hope that it's for the best for me, if that makes sense. But I'm going to try my best to reach that level of inqita' whatsoever. So whether I reach the result or not should not impact whether I do dua or not, because my focus on doing dua should switch from tonight to becoming, oh God, I'm doing dua in order to be able to learn how to completely detach myself. And this is a process, it may take years, but I'm in the mindset right now that I want to detach myself and see you as the only sustainer. The moment you embark on this journey, then the tests will come, right? Not tests will come in order for God to know whether you're doing right or wrong. No, tests come to you in order for you to then go to the next level. Because if tests don't come in front of you, then how are you going to proceed? How are you going to go to the next level? Tests come to then give you the skills necessary. If you make a mistake, you learn from it. If you basically succeed in this test, then you will go to the next level. So then this would be the new mindset that we develop. If that makes sense. I hope that answered your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
So I just wanted to ask about the dua. So when you mentioned dua, it seemed very personal. So my dua to God to change my situation. What about like a dua for a community? Does that have a different benchmark? Does it have a different criteria? You said there were scholars who you can go to, you ask them something, and Allah gives. all of these people, like how many millions of people around the world have been asking for the Imam to come, Imam hasn't come. How many people have been asking for the situation of the Muslims to be better, it hasn't gotten better. So what do you say about that?
Yeah. It's very complicated. Like I don't know if I know the exact right answer for that, but we know for sure that we are encouraged to do big du'as. But the limitation comes from our side, that how much we really do believe in those du'as. Imagine the du'a you do in Shahr Ramadan, after Salat. Allahumma aghni kulla faqir. Like seriously? Like who really believes that? When you do aghni kulla faqir, oh God, just sustain all the poor. Make them rich. Allahumma ashbi' kulla ja'i'. It doesn't even say Muslims, non-Muslims, people in the UK, my family, my friends. So, you see, the du'as are big, are great. Or when you look at Munajat Sha'baniyya, Ilahi habli kamal al-inqita'i ilayk. He says, oh God, give me a complete detachment to you. وَأَنِرْ أَبْصَارَ قُلُوبِنَا بِضِيَاءِ نَظَرَهَا إِلَيْكَ, and enlighten the eyes of our heart to the light of looking at you, O God, right? So when you read this, some of us, let me mention this, okay? So it really depends on our state. I'm not saying I have the exact answer for what you're saying, right? But I am saying that it really depends on our mindset and our belief. Like, I've experienced this myself personally, and maybe some of you have experienced this as well. Like, when you ask Allah for something, often we think, okay, God doesn't give anything without calculation or anything. Although the Qur'an says, يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, without any form of hisab and calculation. But in our minds, like, no, God, if He gives, sometimes when He gives, He takes something else. He can't just give me something and it's so good, but then there's nothing bad about it. When the mindset is this, I don't know if you've gone through this or not. Sometimes you ask for something and then you suddenly get it. And then you're like, okay. And then you continue, like, it's as if like you're waiting for something to go wrong at this point for you to know that, okay, I didn't actually get what I wanted exactly. Part of it went wrong. Yeah, the car is here, but then I crashed. Yes, the house is here, but then something went wrong with it. So that it's not completely what I wanted, because it's the mindset, right? It hurts sometimes. It's like when you think of God that He can't give me something that I really want. What happens is that sometimes when God even gives you that, you with your ill mind, again, I'm not trying to curse you or anything, but us with our ill mind, we can't believe that God actually gave us that by not believing it, we actually create the problem and we find the problem in that thing. I'm praying, I hope I get, for example, a wife or a husband that's perfect, exactly what I want. But in my head, it's like, that's just impossible. How can I really get that? Suddenly someone comes, proposes. Or for example, you see something, oh, that's just, and then you're like, it's not possible. So then your mind starts finding problems. You're looking for problems, right? Because it's impossible for God to give me what is complete. Because I just don't really believe that God can actually give me that. So a lot of the times it's from ourselves. Like even if God gives it to us, we will find a way to just mess it all up, right? We would find a way. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if someone really changes their mindset, Imam Mahdi is really going to come. But I know that with the mindset that we have, a lot of the times we're just like, yeah, I say, oh God, inshallah he comes this Friday. But I'm like, come on, he's not going to come this Friday. Of course he's not, right? A lot of the times, at least many of us. So we're just like, we're not really serious about it. Personally speaking, I don't know about yourself. So I would rather focus on that aspect of myself and then see the results and see if it comes or not, right? At least I would know I've done my side correctly. Assalamu alaikum.
Sorry, Hassan. I'm really sorry I missed your earlier sessions on self-esteem. I just had a question connecting what you're saying today with self-esteem. From what I can understand, is it that like the dua we have to have a belief in ourselves. So when we make the connection with God and we are doing, whether it's via tawassul, whether it's via the Ahlul Bayt or directly to God, is it that we, the stronger belief that we have in ourselves and kind of value our own self-worth, that is then more likely that we have to, that we develop a sense of certainty about ourselves or our purpose or our objectives or our du'as. That link, the way in which we make that dua, that's then strengthened. The link is strengthened as a result of us having stronger sense of self-esteem. Is that?
Yeah. No, thank you for raising that. So, why did I connect the topic of self-esteem and your sense of value for yourself to God? Maybe I should have mentioned this in the first talk, but I'm going to mention it now. But thank you for reminding me. You know the narration that says, "Man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabbah"? The scholars have explained it in so many different ways. The one who knows themselves have indeed known their Lord. One explanation of it is very interesting. Some of the scholars have said when it says "Man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabbah," what does this mean? It means that, so is it the same way it's impossible for someone to know their Lord, it's also impossible for them to be able to know themselves, because I hope I don't get takfired for this, but because then your nafs is in a way part of God. So when God says, so this is a very big thing. So your spirit, if God has blown his spirit in you, and then he says, "Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbah," the one who knows himself indeed has known his Lord. So there is a deep connection between a person who has a sense of self-esteem to then how they can connect to God. And that's why we focus on the concepts in religion that, if understood incorrectly, would basically danger the position of God in our mind, and consequently when the position of God is endangered in our mind, we are the ruh of God. So therefore the position of us is compromised also as a consequence of that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that was the whole gist of these lectures. At least in my head. I don't know if it was conveyed correctly or not.
Thank you so much. We'll end it there. I know there's a couple more questions, but if you're behind after the lecture, then maybe some people can ask after. Is it? Please. If it's okay, could you ask the question after, just after? Shaykh will stay behind and maybe you can ask it to him personally. Thank you. And we'll move on.
Thank you very much. Am I going to recite a little bit? No, unfortunately, I'm not a reciter, but I would really like the blessing and the opportunity to be able to recite, even if it's, a few lines of salam to Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So please excuse me if I don't have much to offer in that regard. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام. صلوات.
उठता है धुआं चलती है हवा, उठता है धुआं चलती है हवा और देख रही है कर्बला। ऐ शाम गरीबा, ऐ शाम गरीबा, मक़तूल हुआ है दर कब से, कमर थकता था नहीं शैतान मगर, पामाल हुआ ज़हरा का जिगर जैसे डूबा सूरज का निशान, वैसे डूबा दिल ज़ैनब का और देख रही है कर्बला। अकबर भी नहीं रोती है सकीना मक़तल में, बाली बिछी दामन भी जला, सब बीबियों की छिनती है रिदा और देख रही है कर्बला। दरिया कर्बल में सोते हैं बहादुर मक़तल में, सब बीबियां हैं बेचैन यहाँ, खामोश है बच्चे जंगल में, होता है यतीमों पर हमला और मार के हंसते हैं आदा और देख रही है कर्बला। जलते हुए खैमों में गिरा, सालार हरम है गश में पड़ा, जल जाए यहाँ या बन में चले, बतला दो हमें मेरे मौला ज़ैनब अहमद का और देख रही है गर्व बरा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा पहरे पे अब ज़ैनब तन्हा हाथों में लिए टूटा नेज़ा अब्बास हरम बनना है उसे आसमां अब उसका पर्दा बच्चों को संभालेगा खुद को कोई न सहारा है उसका और देख रही है गर्व बरा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा कहती है असगर की मादर अरमान मेरे है खून में तर मक़तल से न आया फिर वापस 6 माह का मेरा नूर नजर पानी न मयस्सर उसको हुआ गर्दन पे वो तीर सितम खाया और देख रही है गर्व बरा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा मासूम सकीना रोती हुई घबरा के यूं मक़तल में आई चिल्लाई के ऐ मेरे बाबा किस हाल में है बेटी तेरी खाती हूँ तमाचे चेहरे पर पास अपने बुला लो ऐ बाबा और देख रही है गर्व बरा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा पीछे बची बन में आकर क्या देखती है बिनते हैदर आराम से सोती है बच्ची एक बेसर लाश के सीने पर है चारों तरफ फूका दरिया सुनसान है जंगल ये सारा और देख रही है गर्व बरा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा ऐ शाम गरीबा
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलामु अलैका या सय्यदी या मौलाया या रसूल अल्लाह अस्सलामु अलैका या सय्यदी या मौलाया या नबी अल्लाह अस्सलामु अलैका या सय्यदी या मौलाया या मुहम्मद इब्न अब्दिल्लाह व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह व अला इब्न अम्मिका अमीरिल मुअमिनीन अली इब्न अबी तालिब वसी रसूल रब्बिल आलमीन अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह व अला बदअतिका अस्सिद्दीक़ति अत्ताहिरा फातिमत अज़्ज़हरा सय्यदति निसाइल आलमीन अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह व अला ज़ौजतिका अलवफ़िय्यति अलग़र्रा ख़दीजत अलकुबरा उम्मिल मुअमिनीन अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह व अला वलदैका الإمامين الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أئمة المسلمين من ذرية ولدك الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة ابن الحسن المهدي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك، وجعلنا الله من أنصارك وأعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
Brothers and sisters, please do join us on the coming weeks for our regular programs. On Fridays we have a regular lecture program. On Thursdays we have a Du'a Kumayl program, and we also have other programs including the yoga programs on Tuesday for ladies, Bahmanpur program on Sundays. I also have some tuition classes and madrasa classes. We have a lot going on, so please do check out our website for more details. And also we're still collecting for the MUHARRAM fund. The cost of the MUHARRAM program is approximately £8,000. If you'd like to make a donation, there are donation boxes on both sides, or please speak to any member of the executive committee. Thank you.